Hey guys, sorry for the wait there. If you were with me last night, you know that I was streaming until like 6 hours ago. A lot happened yesterday. Okay, among the several things that popped up were we had Blake Lively's response to Justin's motion for judgment on the pleadings, which we went through in full last night. We had Blake's response to Justin's motion for summary judgment, which we skimmed over last night because it didn't come out until 1:30 in the morning. Which is what we're going to go through this morning. We had Stephanie Jones' response to the motion for summary judgment by Jen Abel, which I haven't gone through yet, but I will tonight. And then we had some interesting information come out in a declaration that Stephanie Jones submitted in support of her motion for spoliation sanctions. So you can go to last night's stream, and I put timestamps if you want to listen to, the response to the judgment on the pleading stuff. We're going to go through the motion for summary judgment this morning. The exhibits were still coming out this morning. There's like 500 plus pages of them. I finally just downloaded them all. I luckily had a little bit of PTO left that I have to burn through before the end of the year, or because it doesn't roll over. So I'm going to get a late start to work this morning so I can sit here and kind of do this. But just a couple of things that came up last night that I found particularly interesting. So one of them, which is what we're going to get into a lot more this morning, is that Blake is now accusing Justin of angrily screaming at Alex Sachs. I believe on multiple occasions she accuses him of getting angry to the point of yelling, and at one point slamming his hands on a chair near where she was sitting. Now, mind you, these are words coming from Blake. So how much weight does that really carry depends on the reader. You guys know my position. I don't find her to be a particularly credible source of information, but I don't know anything about Alex Sachs. I don't know what Alex Sachs said about any of this during her deposition. So we're going to find out. I'm going to read through the actual document, the response, and then we'll go through some of the exhibits. Some of this is, of course, sealed, so we're not going to be able to see it right away. A lot of the document itself is actually redacted, which is obviously always frustrating, but that will eventually become unsealed. It just takes a little while. Little attorney pointed out that it looks like MSJ opposition was late because it said filed 12/4. I don't know, because they did actually file it on 12/3. I saw it come up, the non-public version, but we can take a look at Pacer really quick and see if maybe I was just too tired to notice that. It's entirely possible, right? So give me one sec. That would be actually fucking hilarious, though. So she's accusing him of that, and then also saying that Alex Sachs pled with him to investigate inappropriate behavior on set, him and Jamie, and that they ignored her pleas. Now, again, these are just words. These are accusations being brought forth for the first time. I don't know. Let's see here. Memorandum. So the memorandum in opposition says 12/4, yes. But so that's the public version. So the actual document, let me share this with you. The actual document here, when they filed it, is number 1064 here. Selected parties, memorandum of law in opposition, re 952 motion for summary judgment. So you can see that was filed on time yesterday. It's just that this stuff didn't process. The public version didn't come up until 12/4. I don't think that really means too much. But the actual document that they did file was filed and made available to the parties on December 3rd. So, and I know that because I saw it come up and I was like, oh, for sure, I'm going to be able to start before midnight tonight. And guess who didn't get the document until 1:30? Okay, so yeah, it was a long night last night, but I don't mind. Will you be reading any of the exhibits this morning? These things just freaking came up, dude. So probably, but I'll be going over them with you in real time. So I have no idea what we're gonna see and how I'm gonna navigate that. But sure, we can skim through some of it. Like I said, I took an hour and a half to start work late this morning, so I got some time to sit with you guys and go through some of this stuff without rushing too much of it. There are two more things that I wanted to point out from last night, and these things are from judgment on the pleadings response, and Stephanie Jones' declaration for the spoliation sanctions. So the one bizarre thing from the judgment on the pleadings response that I wanted you to see, and you can see this document, we go through it in full in last night's stream, like I said. Mods, if you could post a link to that stream if you're here in the comments, please, so people know where to find it. Okay, and so people, if you weren't with us last night, oh my god, this is the most Karen-like. Sorry about that. That's my normal alarm to clock in for work. But this is the most insane. Okay, let me just read it to you. All right. Why am I bothered trying to explain? All right. That is hopefully readable for you guys. Okay, let me close down Pacer so I don't have so many tabs open. All right. So this is the other document, the response to the motion for judgment on the pleadings. We're just going to go over this one section here. Other actions in California set the tone for harassment. Shortly after Miss Lively accepted the role of Lily Bloom, Mr. Heath remarked that Miss Lively would be birthed into the role, a statement that sexualized her. Okay, I'm sorry. Look, Jesus Christ. This lady has a weird obsession with sexualizing birth. It's very strange. And invoked female reproductive imagery to describe her professional contributions. This objectification, made from California, where Mr. Heath resided, signaled that Miss Lively's value was tied to her gender rather than her talent. Now, guys, people use words metaphorically with colloquial meanings all the time. He didn't mean literally spread your legs open and pop out. You know what I mean? Like, what a fucking weirdo that she's making such a big deal about this. People say all the time, like, the birth of a movement, you know, it's like the inception of something, the start of something. The birth of something means something is coming to fruition, coming to existence. It's being created. It's starting. You know what I mean? It's not literally, you know, like popping out Blake Lively and like, here's your role. You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about, bitch? Like this chick has 4 kids, and every time she hears the word birth, she's like, porn. Like, what's wrong with you? Good Lord. And mind you, like, so CJ points out who birthed her into the role, Ryan, out of his perineum. So mind you that Blake Lively and her husband were using this inappropriate language about, you know, very private body parts, like Ryan's perineum, casually in conversation with Justin Baldoni and possibly Jamie Heath and others. And then they're trying to say that it was the Wayfarer parties who were inappropriate in their relationships with them for using language like birth. Okay. So they want to say stuff like yummy, flirty, ball busting in private text to Justin Baldoni and talking about Ryan's perineum. But then in these motions, when they're trying to paint Justin as the bad guy, they want to say that, well, Justin was her employer and blah, 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 as if Blake didn't have all the fucking power on that set, by the way. She definitely did. So you can't just have it both ways. You can't invoke a relationship like that where you can say, you know, stuff about perineums to be funny, and then later act like you were so outraged by everything that the point of somebody saying someone was birthed into a role was sexual. Like, you gotta pick one, and you picked one. All right, when you started acting like somebody who would say like crass, crude, perverse things, like they were speaking to a friend in passing. Okay, this is ridiculous. So anyways, if you want to see us go over this document, the response to the motion for judgment on the pleadings, go to last night's stream and then go to the timestamp for the response to the MJOP. Okay. The last thing from last night that I wanted to point out to you guys, which I won't pull up the document here. Actually, you know what I will? Um, because it's again, it's another once off, and then we'll get into the actual response to the motion for summary judgment. Give me 1 second to pull it up. Okay. There we go. Let me zoom it, or not zoom in, but let me find the exact page here. So I'm not going to read the whole email, just the part of it that was interesting. And so this, mind you, is from Stephanie Jones in support of her motion for spoliation sanctions, but this is just something that, kind of incidentally came out. And the most hilarious part of this is that it's probably true. But it was just so bizarre that my brain broke when I read this last night. Okay. Additionally, Miss Case's testimony, and Miss Case is a current or former employee of TAG, Melissa Nathan's crisis PR agency, and Stephanie Jones and Melissa Nathan hate each other. Okay. And Stephanie Jones is saying Melissa Nathan, Jen Abel, etc., did this whole smear campaign against her, including websites called Stephanie Jones, sucks.com or something. It wasn't actually that. It was like StephanieJonesLies.com and a Twitter account that was disparaging her. Okay. So with that in mind, additionally, given Miss Case's testimony about her and Miss Nathan's involvement in the websites and social media pages disparaging Miss Jones on behalf of prospective TAG client Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, we also expect you to conduct a manual search and produce all communications, including signal messages or documents between any of Miss Nathan, Miss Case, The Rock, Mr. Wallace, or anyone else at TAG about Miss Jones, Jonesworks, or relating to the disparaging websites or related social media pages or the Business Insider article, including any payment in connection with the sites and pages. So I guess the breaking news there is that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Katie Case, who works for Melissa Nathan, testified to the extent that this is true, I suppose. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was sitting on Twitter under an account with AI watermelon profile picture saying all kinds of teen girl drama shit about Stephanie Jones, which is fucking hilarious. So apparently, and I'm not very well versed in this PR stuff, I recommend going to actually Brianna Eve, my friend who talks about the PR aspect of all this stuff, and actually predicted that it was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson who was behind this stuff. So she's a smart lady. So what was I saying here? The funny thing is, like, he was actually behind this. And when you think about it, it's like a burner Twitter account. We all say, like, oh, it's Ryan's burner account when Twitter accounts say, like, crazy shit. But this was actually Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson behind some kind of, allegedly behind some kind of burner account, sitting there saying Stephanie Jones is a skank bitch. You know what I mean? Like, that's not exactly what he was saying. But when you think about the big Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson sitting there typing away on a little phone, like, Stephanie Jones is a mean girl, it's like really funny. But Stephanie Jones apparently burned him as a client because he was her client by putting out terrible articles about him. And so it was expected that he would kind of fight back. You know what I mean? So, but the whole thing is just insane. And that's obviously going to become something later on. Now, remember, Stephanie Jones, when she filed her lawsuit, Jones versus Abel's a separate action to this. Stephanie Jones named John Doe's 1 through 10 from the website. So it's what's interesting to me is that I never would have predicted at the beginning of all this is that one of the John Does is Dwayne Johnson. So apparently, I don't know if he's going to be named in the lawsuit now or what, how that works. We'll see. The Jones versus Abel case is a separate but related case. They do not even have a trial date yet. So there's a lot that's going to come out there. And I would argue that Stephanie Jones and the Jones versus Abel case, while the circus is in the Baldoni Lively disputes, the Stephanie Jones dispute was actually the catalyst for everything that we've been seeing happen since last December. So she's actually to blame, in my opinion, for all of it. Stephanie Jones absolutely blew shit up. So she's got some powerful people who don't really appreciate the way she treated them as clients. And it's not Wayfarer. It's not Justin Baldoni or anyone else behind those websites. It's other high-profile famous people, which is insane to me because I knew nothing about PR in the PR game before all of this. So we're learning so much, kids. All right, why don't we get into the actual document you guys came here for? But there's just so much to get through. We're obviously not going to get through all of the exhibits and stuff this morning, but we're going to do the best that we can, okay? All right. And again, we went through some of that stuff, the declaration that we were just looking at, Stephanie Jones' declaration. We went through some of that last night in the stream in the beginning. So if you want to see more of that, you can go to last night's stream and take a look at the timestamps. Okay. Pull this up. Now, like I said, a lot of this is like sealed, so we have some stuff that's redacted off, but it will eventually, most likely, like it has in the past with all these documents, come out. Like, let me just scroll through this so you can see how much. So yeah, so there's a lot of redacting, and usually Blake's lawyers are pretty strategic with the redactions. They're very good at creative redacting to the point where it looks like what's behind the black bars is something that it ultimately is not. And I should know because they used redactions at one point, or an attorney's eyes only provision, to suggest that I and many others were named in TAG, Melissa Nathan's crisis PR agency, named in TAG's disclosures. And that's why they couldn't meet and confer with us when Blake was trying to subpoena the shit out of every woman on the internet who had anything to say about her that she didn't like. And then, of course, Wayfarer and TAG called their bluff and said, you know what, fine, lift the attorney's eyes only provision. And what do you know? My name was not on that list. So if anybody knows about Blake Lively playing the redaction game, right here, okay? Lauren's reaction to the rock and the doc made me laugh. Dude, my brain melted. All right, give me 1 second here, guys, and then we'll just get started. Do you want to know what this looked like for me this morning? So the last thing that came up was this document last night, and we did skim over it, well into like past 2 in the morning. But let me show you what this looked like for me when I woke up this morning and the stuff that, I had just processed through. Okay, so here's Pacer. Right, so here's where we started yesterday before all this came crashing down on me. Right here at 10:38, I think. Yeah, 10:38. And so below this line, all of this is what happened last night while I was streaming. So we have a declaration from Blake Lively, as you can see here, but right now we only have, not this one. It's this one, a declaration from Blake Lively right here. As you can see, it's the selected parties, so we can't see that yet. I don't know if there's going to be a public version that'll come out shortly, but possibly. And if there is, I'll check back before I end the stream and we can read it. Or if somebody else sees it come out as we're reading, then the chat can let me know and I'll download that. And then there's also a declaration from Don Saladino. But all of these exhibits, there are 300 of them, just came through this morning. So by the time I fell asleep last night, it was somewhere between 3 and 4 a.m. and this stuff was not out yet. So that's how long it took to process this shit. It's crazy. And then somebody's pointing out here, boys are birthed too. We don't only birth girls and find boys under blackberry bushes. Yeah. So for her complaining about the use of the term birth is really insane, as if it's some kind of sexist term. Okay. Anyways, that was what I was working with this morning, and that's why we started so late. But yeah, I do have all of that downloaded, at least everything that's available to the public. Okay. Let me push this over here. All right. That should be big enough for everyone to read. Okay. In their latest effort to avoid accountability for the hostile environment they created during the production and marketing of It Ends With Us, Justin Baldoni, Jamie Heath, Steve Sarowitz, and their co-defendants asked this court, why didn't you name the women? Why didn't you name the women? There are several of them, right? Or at least a couple. I find that interesting. Okay, and their co-defendants asked this court to shield them from trial and deny Blake Lively her day in court by throwing the kitchen sink at Lively's sexual harassment and retaliation claims. But defendants' scattershot theories collapse under the weight of the overwhelming evidence in documents and testimony from witness after witness that Baldoni and Heath redacted, which they got away with. This is not, as defendants claim, a story of minor annoyances fueled by creative differences, but instead one of a toxic environment in which, and then it's redacted, that Sony's representative remarked, numerous women have written or testified about feeling redacted, describe Baldoni and Heath's behavior as, we can't see that, with Baldoni and Heath by the time the film premiered. Okay. Betraying their redacted brand, Baldoni and Heath refused to listen to what numerous women told them. Instead, their conduct and their entire defense has deployed a redacted of deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender, DARVO, according to Dr. Jennifer Freyd, who coined the term and submitted an expert report supporting Lively in this case. So I don't know if we can see the expert report or not. I'm going to say probably not, but we can go through those exhibits and see if it's in there. But the term DARVO, sure, you can apply it, I guess, in some roundabout way to what Blake Lively's saying if you take everything she's saying at face value. And I have a problem with expert reports and the way that, they're used to kind of, you can use an expert report to frame something in your favor, and then another expert who's maybe just as good at what their job is can say something entirely different, obviously, right, for the defense. So I don't put a lot of stock into expert reports when it comes to things like psychology. And I know that that's maybe not a popular opinion, but I've just seen too much to where I'm like, I don't think that you are necessarily being the most objective party here. And I mean that in like multiple cases. I don't mean that just here. So I don't have any particular beef with Dr. Jennifer Freyd here, right? I don't have anything bad to say about her. I'm just saying I've seen expert reports when it comes to stuff like this that I feel like are not very objective. And I feel like sometimes these things are applied incorrectly because it assumes everything that the plaintiff here, not the plaintiff even, I don't know if is she the plaintiff? Yeah. Is saying is true, right? So if I come up with a fictional story in which everything happened the way that Blake Lively says it happens, and then I go to Dr. Jennifer Freyd and I explain that situation to her in those words, of course she's going to say that's Darvo, So, but I actually disagree with using this term in this context at all. I think that Darvo is being overused here. It's watered down. The therapy speak is exhausting on the internet to the point where people don't actually understand like where things apply and they don't anymore. It's kind of like the term gaslighting, right? Now, when somebody does something somebody doesn't like, or they're not entirely truthful, people will be like, you're gaslighting me. No, that's not exactly what gaslighting is. Gaslighting isn't just like telling a lie. So that's kind of what I'm getting at here is like these terms for abuse and stuff like that. They're not exactly being applied properly a lot of the time. So, in my experience, Darvo is widely misused by abusers. They accuse the victim of Darvo. And yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. I see that a lot. And I think it's because it's like a popular thing. Because when you say Darvo, that triggers that for a lot of people who have suffered abuse and who have been gaslit in that way. And so then they are like, oh my God, so you're telling me that what that guy is saying is not true and that he's just trying to Darvo you. And like, oh my God, I can totally relate to that. Now I hate him. Okay, so it's a when you use trigger words like that are really popular with people, and a thing that's supposed to put a name to what abuse victims are feeling, it kind of plants a seed to where you're supposed to be on my side because what I'm going through is what you went through. This guy's Darvoing me, so what he's saying may sound like it makes sense to you, but it's because he's an abuser and he's doing the Darvo, right? Okay, so I don't know. Hopefully that made sense, guys. I tend to go off on tangents when it comes to the psychology stuff, but it was my job for a long time. So I wasn't a psychologist, but I worked in psych for several years. So especially with patients in the hospital. So okay. Defendants created a hostile environment, and when confronted with complaints, they abandoned Wayfarer's policies by refusing to investigate the concerns because he thought it would be better. Don't know what that says. Defendants buried these concerns, even though, and in fact, because Baldoni fully understood by November of 2023 that Lively's written complaints redacted. Yet, rather than attempting to clear their names with an investigation, defendants went on the attack, claiming that they are victims of a bully who fabricated complaints to take over the movie. Okay, so you can see here why this account of what happened, she would go to the Dr. Jennifer Freyd and say, here's what happened. I complained, they didn't investigate, and then they turned around and said that I was a bully. And you can see why Dr. Jennifer Freyd would then, submit a report saying that resembles, the process I describe as DARVA. But that's not necessarily what happened, okay? She, in this document, is going to say a bunch of times that she made complaints or somebody made complaints and that they refused to investigate. But let's take a look at everything that we really know, everything that has actually been shown by evidence and through documents in this case. We know that she, several times, refused investigations, okay? Not only when it came to filing a formal complaint, which, Wayfarer and Sony asked her about and she refused. It happened with the CRD. She refused the investigation. She didn't want it. And it happened when Wayfarer Studios did launch an investigation into her claims. She went to the court and tried to get it shut down. Right? It showed in the court documents that she refused, via her attorneys, to participate in the investigation. And she told the courts, or not shut down per se, but she told the courts that she was demanding access to everything in that investigation, all the materials, everything that was said by everyone who was involved. She was demanding access to that, even though Wayfarer themselves weren't privy to it because it was an ongoing investigation. So the third party firm that was conducting that investigation were like, no, we're not going to turn over that information to you. Wayfarer themselves don't even have this information. Okay, we don't turn over anything until our investigation is over. And she tried to intimidate everyone who was involved in that, and she refused to participate in it herself. Okay, and it wasn't Wayfarer. She wouldn't have had to go in a room with Steve Sarowitz and say everything, right? That's not what that was. It was a third-party investigative firm who was conducting that. And she still refused. So, and then ultimately the judge decided, they obviously don't have to turn this stuff over to you, but it's not something they can bring up in court. Which that wasn't the purpose, necessarily of why they were doing it. But I don't know if that sounds familiar to you guys, but this happened months and months ago. So, but she multiple times, keep that in mind as we're reading this. We know this is a fact. Multiple times refused investigation, refused to file a formal complaint. And she here is going to try to convince everyone that she complained, and everyone complained multiple times. But we know from Sony that she did not. Okay? All right. Defendants buried these concerns, even though, and in fact, because Baldoni fully understood by November of 2023 that Lively's written complaints redacted. Now, November 2023 was when the 17-point list of demands for return to production happened. So that wasn't a written complaint. We've seen that. We know what that was. It was something that they used to extort Wayfarer with, in the colloquial sense, right? Not in the legal term exact, you know what I mean? But in the colloquial sense, extort Wayfarer to take control of the film. Okay? I'm saying okay a lot, aren't I? One sec. Okay. Yet, rather than attempting to clear their names with an investigation, defendants went on the attack. No. The Wayfarer defendants have peddled their victimization narrative since the spring of 2023, including in response to Lively's concerns during production, and then in reaction to her efforts to remediate her concerns. In August 2024, they relied on background conversations and leaks to friendly journalists, a covert strategy that departed from, and it's redacted, Heath's words at the time, marketing plan being followed by the rest of the cast. So they had this kind of truce ceasefire thing going on. So they're saying they relied on background conversations, of course, because Blake was shunning Justin Baldoni from, everything related to marketing for the film, or wouldn't participate if he was included. So yeah, they relied on background conversations. They did talk to journalists. We've seen the back and forth there. And the thing is, it's being presented like Justin's team and his publicists were the only ones talking to journalists, which of course they are talking to journalists. They're publicists. But I guarantee you, everything she's accusing them of doing is not only, in my opinion, standard PR practice, but also probably the same shit that Blake Lively's publicists are doing behind the scenes. It's not, something that should be used to demonize anybody. But she passes it off to the public who don't totally understand the PR game. Like I totally didn't when we first started covering this stuff. She passes it off to the public who don't understand how PR works and the way that publicists kind of manipulate things behind the scenes for their clients. She passes it off to the public as something that's nefarious and terrible. And she can make them look bad for it because the public who have never seen anything like this before can be like, oh my God, they can manipulate SEO and manipulate websites and stuff like that. Yes. And her publicists do it as well. And so do, Dwayne Johnson's, So it's not like this horrible, terrible thing that they were doing. It's pretty standard practice. It's just that people are kind of shocked to learn how things work behind the scenes. And she's putting all of that on Justin Baldoni because Justin Baldoni is not, suing her for what her publicist did. So he can't, put forth a bunch of stuff that says, well, Blake's publicist did this and that, because it's not relevant, right? Okay. The Wayfarer defendants have peddled their victimization narrative since the spring of 2023. Okay, whatever. Including, no, that's not what I want. Yeah, including in response to Lively's concerns and then in reaction to her efforts to remediate. Defendants repeat their mantra that the instantaneous avalanche of online attacks against Lively and the other women associated with the film was somehow an organic backlash to Lively, hoping to conceal the fact that their untraceable social media campaign was designed to appear organic. So this right here, she's saying there was an instantaneous avalanche of online attacks against Lively and the other women associated with the film. I absolutely do not recall seeing anything about the other women associated with the film that resembled the kind of negative PR that Blake Lively was getting because of her own past behavior and the way she was marketing the film. I know that Jenny Slate has previously had some abuse allegations. Like she's been accused of abusing a former partner. I think it was Chris Evans, if I'm remembering that correctly. She's been accused of abusing a former boyfriend. And so there was, some obviously negative press about her being involved in a film about domestic violence. That's of her own doing, right? That has nothing to do with Wayfarer. But it wasn't like a huge thing that was being blown out of proportion. I didn't even hear about it until much later on. And then as far as the other women, I don't know what you mean, unless you mean Colleen Hoover, who, again, already had a whole slew of people who didn't like the way that she wrote her book and thought that it glorified a domestic violence relationship. I haven't read the book, so I couldn't tell you. I've seen enough of it at this point to know that it had a lot of sexual content and the like, but I haven't read it in full, so I can't really comment too much on that. So there wasn't some instantaneous avalanche of attacks against the other women, like Jenny Slate and Colleen Hoover. These were pre-existing issues that the public then started to talk about more because Slate and Hoover were put into the public spotlight with the promotion of this film that was going to be pretty popular because the book had such a fan base. So she's making it sound as if they were suddenly pouring down all this crazy negative press and criticism on all these women when that's not what happened. And in fact, even with Blake Lively herself, her behavior from the past is what ultimately, caught up with her and made people upset. Because people who had never, looked into her life too much even before saw the video with Shasti Flaw with the little bump thing. And they learned about her wedding on the plantation, which people didn't like. So, and then she was marketing the film and promoting her booze brands, naming a drink after the abuser in the book. So it's not hard to see where the public took that negatively and didn't have nice things to say about her. Okay. And somebody pointed out here, Jenny Slate freaking hit Chris What's-His-Face from Captain America, not afraid to act stupid. So, yeah, so Chris Evans, who played Captain America in the Marvel movies, I guess there's a new Captain America now, but he was the original. Jenny Slate hit him in their relationship is what people were referring to. So I don't know if that was ever something she came out and admitted or if it's still just an allegation, but regardless, if you're having her play a role, a significant role, by the way, in a movie about domestic violence, and she is, known to the public for allegations of previously hitting her boyfriend, that's a problem. And Blake is trying to pass that off as Justin's fault. Okay, sure. Now you could, maybe criticize them for the casting decision there. I don't know. That's another conversation. It's not, it's not his fault that the public doesn't like her. All right. Okay. The defendant's litigation strategy has parroted their inversion of victim and offender. Defendants filed a frivolous lawsuit, now dismissed, and their lawyers supercharged the Wayfarer defendants' narratives through friendly journalists and content creators, and by laundering their Darvo strategy through this court's docket. So, we've been over this. They say that, Brian Friedman defamed her. She's claiming that, they mobilized content creators on their behalf. The thing is, giving press statements to journalists or even content creators who reach out as independent journalists, that's not mobilizing someone in retaliation, especially because people reach out and ask them these questions. Even I said this to the court when I had to file, even I reached out at one point to Brian Friedman's firm and asked a question. I didn't hear back, mind you, so I never had any actual contact with them back and forth. I reached out to them. They never responded to me because why the fuck would they? I was a total rando. And I didn't know how to go about this. It didn't even occur to me, hey, I should contact a publicist, not a lawyer. But even when I had to file with the court to quash Blake's subpoena for my information, I mentioned in a declaration that I had reached out to Brian Friedman, but he did not respond back. So it's not unusual for content creators and journalists to reach out to them and for there to be some contact with, journalists that they already know and trust, and content creators that they know are legitimate and they can give a statement to. It's not some sort of social crime, right? It's standard, very standard practice. Okay. 1 second. But defendants campaigned to transform Lively, a mother of four who thinks birth is porn. A mother of four with decades of experience in the industry who simply sought a safe and respectful workplace into a bully who took over Baldoni's film is not a defense to harassment, retaliation, defamation, or any claim Lively has advanced. Okay, nor is anything that actually happened, in my opinion, rising to the level of harassment or retaliation, but, that's irrelevant, I guess. The record evidence is clear. Lively's claims survive summary judgment and must be sent to a jury. The court should deny the MSJ in full. So, I will say this. I agree that the sexual harassment claims should go to a jury. I don't think that she was sexually harassed. I think a lot of what she puts forth in this response is based on just the words of Blake Lively and, possibly some others based on what's being implied, but a lot of it's redacted, you can't really see. I do think that's going to be something that a jury should decide, and that's just my opinion, as a layperson. I'm not a lawyer. I think that the sexual harassment claims should go to trial and not be dismissed on summary judgment. As far as the defamation stuff, all that about the retaliation, I wouldn't be surprised if some of that got kicked out. So, all right. Background. Baldoni and Wayfarer curated a misleading feminist brand. So I talked a little bit about this last night, and we're not going to read everything that she says here because there's a lot of rehashing about, like, criticism about his brand and what he's done in the past. But I'll read this paragraph here. In 2017, Baldoni launched the Man Enough brand, which he described as a movement around healthy manhood and greater equity for all. In public commentary, he openly admitted a history of mistreating women, estimating there is a 1,000,000% probability that there is a woman or two that he has in some way made uncomfortable by saying something or doing something that was chauvinistic or sexist, and that he did not always ask for consent or always listen when they said no. Baldoni promised to shut the hell up and listen to women so that one day we don't have to live in a world where a woman has to risk everything and come forward to say the words "me too." So she tries to use this against him. And what I want to say about that is that it's terrible that we have a guy out there who's like doing his best to kind of combat the social issues between men and women, and is trying to do the self-reflection and the work to say that there was a time that maybe I spoke over a woman in a way that was sexist, and I wasn't listening to her as much as I should have, or maybe I mansplained something, or maybe I said or did something that made her feel uncomfortable because in the position of a woman, she has a different perspective, and maybe that to me it wasn't a big deal, but to her it was. It's unfortunate that this guy's open and vulnerable with his flaws and his mistakes in the past, which don't include anything violent or any actual sexual harassment or anything like that. It's really unfortunate that he chose to be vulnerable and to open himself up for the betterment of other men and to try to kind of promote healthy masculinity versus the toxic masculinity you hear a lot about. It is unfortunate that she's using that to punish him, because he has and still could do a lot of good for a lot of people, and a lot of men who feel like they can't be in touch with this stuff, or who feel like they want to write off, when women bring up concerns and say something is sexist or something made them uncomfortable, and they want to write that off as some sort of like ultra feminist, annoyance, right? And I see that a lot online. So he's trying to promote this healthy version of masculinity to where you will listen to the woman who's saying that and try to consider her position, okay, and think about that in a way that might make it a more equal conversation, to where her experiences and her feelings, carry some weight there, to where you might need to change the way you're doing things. And she's using that to punish him. And so now that kind of sets us back to, well, look at these women. They're just complaining all the time about everything because, they're ultra feminists who don't actually give a shit about who's right or who was wrong. And that's not necessarily how I feel. I'm not speaking on my feelings. I'm just talking about the sentiment on the internet in general. This sets things back when somebody acts like this towards a man who's trying to do good. So, and I also want to point out that in this document and the other document as well that we went over, she's kind of like writing it as if he's exploiting the feminist movement. And Justin Baldoni doesn't, necessarily posit himself as a feminist icon. He has this idea of healthy masculinity that he wants to promote. He wants to help men be better, be healthier, and to not lash out in ways that are toxic. And so he's not necessarily trying to monetize the women's movement, as Ryan Reynolds would say. He's trying to better, to kind of better the way that men approach and process things so that they can have better relationships to women, yes, but also healthier relationships with themselves so that they're better for everyone around them. And if you listen to what he says and you listen to some of his podcasts and you read some of his books, you could understand that. But you have to actually care enough to do the work to listen to his perspective, to read his perspective, to understand. Otherwise, she can frame it however she wants. And that sucks, right? But, if you haven't yet, go listen to some of their podcasts. I like the one that Justin did with his dad. Sam seems like such a cute dad, but it's a really great podcast where they're kind of talking about Well, I don't want to take away from their story too much, but I've put clips on my YouTube channel before into some other stuff. So um, it's in a playlist called Wayfarer Support or something. And so you're welcome to look at that if you want, but I won't get into that too much right now because I need to get through this document. So anyways, Hoover was reluctant to and we're not reading this word for word, obviously, but Hoover was reluctant to option the film to a man, but agreed to sell the rights to Wayfarer because she believed Baldoni, and that's redacted. Hoover explicitly requested that a woman direct the film. Okay, she can request that, yes, but she doesn't get to demand it. If she, gives them the rights to the film, and he's the one who wants to make the movie, and we've seen that. We've seen the emails between Colleen and Justin, and she knew that Justin was the one making this movie, and I believe she knew he wanted to be the director. Because she was the one who suggested that he should be one of the actors in the film and that he should play Ryle. So she knew that he was doing this. Okay. Although Baldoni had directed only 2 small films, Wayfarer decided that he would direct, executive produce, and be the film's lead male actor. Yeah, it's their project, and it's his studio. Wayfarer appointed Heath, with even less experience, as lead producer as president of It Ends With Us movie, the wholly owned entity that produced the film, and with Wayfarer employed all of the cast and crew. Yeah, again, it's their studio, their project. If it's your studio producing a movie, you don't have to. Everybody starts somewhere, right? And if it's your studio making the movie, then yeah, you can have Heath as a producer, right? I don't understand the issue there because they had other people, right? So like Alex Sachs, an experienced independent producer. So they had other people, lending a hand and producing the film. It's not like no one else was working on it. Even if it was, it's their movie. So I don't understand this in any way. I guess it's just to say that the men were in charge of the film, but they knew that when she signed the rights to Wayfarer. I don't really understand the problem here. Also, this has nothing to do with sexual harassment against Blake, but cool. Right. Baldoni, Heath, and Sarwitz knew they needed an A-list actress to headline the film. Well, why would they not want an A-list actress to headline the film? When Wayfarer learned of Lively's potential interest, they put on a full court press to obtain her services. Right. Okay. Cool. Right. Baldoni and Lively met on December 14th in what Baldoni described as a redacted. In that meeting, Baldoni volunteered that his penis was circumcised without Lively expressing any interest in the subject of Baldoni's genitalia. So, right there, I'm going to say we're missing some context, right? It's kind of like when she said that he was body shaming her and saying awful things, and then she was actually the one who brought up his nose and body shaming him. I don't have any context for this, so I'm not going to take that at face value. If he did just randomly bring up that his penis was circumcised, and that's a big if, then yeah, that's fucking weird. And I would be uncomfortable, but then I probably wouldn't sign on to the project, right? So that's why I'm saying we're missing some context here. Lively later spoke with Liz Plank, Baldoni's longtime podcast host, who redacted, whatever, of working with Baldoni, but indicated that he had worked on himself, so she was hopeful that Lively would not have issues. So we know that he's talked about his past behaviors on the podcast, that he had like a porn addiction and all that. And like he's talked about his personal experiences on his personal podcast. Yeah. So I'm sure this has something to do with that. But whatever. Lively was disturbed, but assuaged by Baldoni's purported commitment to being a feminist devoted to combating toxic masculinity. So again, they're just trying to paint him out to be a creep, and we don't even know what's here. So, and again, this is all stuff that's being said by people who have some benefit by hanging around with Blake and Ryan. So we know that. And also, this is all Blake Lively's account, which I don't find to be entirely credible. So we'll see. This is like what happened with the New York Times all over again. Her accusations come out. It makes him look really fucking creepy. And then we have to wait for his response. And I don't know when that's due. It's within the next couple weeks, though. to hear what actually happened and what the context was, and then we make a decision from there, right? So I'm not saying he never said anything that was like maybe came off weird to her, and I'm not saying he never made a mistake. I'm saying that I don't believe the version of events in full that she's putting forth here. That doesn't make sense to me. Okay? One second. Okay. So they're saying that she was disturbed, but she signed on to the project anyways, which again doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I think we're missing some stuff here. Lively agreed to play Lily Bloom because she believed in the film's message of female empowerment, personally and professionally, and of the importance of ending the cycle of abuse. Baldoni aggressively leveraged Lively's fame and her 20-plus years of experience in the entertainment industry and regularly solicited her feedback on many aspects of pre-production work, including but not limited to casting and hiring, wardrobe and makeup, set design and decoration, and the script. So we know that with the wardrobe and makeup stuff, she absolutely took control of that in a way that was what I can only describe as bag lady outfit with money. I don't know. Like, it's just the wardrobe was so bizarre. Her choices for the wardrobe were so bizarre, and she like brought things in that she wanted to wear for that character, and she was very adamant that she wanted her character's outfits to like look sexy. And then when he would say that the outfit was sexy, she would be like, "Oh my god, you're harassing me." So let's see the script. We know that when he didn't take her feedback on the script, she got upset. We know that because we've seen that. So she's trying to say that he like exploited her years of experience and all that and regularly solicited her feedback. But what actually happened was she wanted more control of the film than she was given by her role as an actress. And she got upset when he didn't take her feedback or he didn't take her suggestions. Okay. All right. Baldoni gushed to Lively that she was a genuine collaborator and redacted. There's a lot of redacted stuff here. Lively did not know that Baldoni privately resented collaborating with a prominent actress. Wholly self-absorbed. Okay. Arrogantly insisting behind her back in December 2022 that he had discovered Hoover's book, something could something and intended to something. I have no idea what that means. But of course he was talking to his friends, you know, behind the scenes. Like people are allowed to complain to their friends behind the scenes and still, you know, be able to work with her professionally. As far as like, I didn't know he resented working with such a special actress. You know what I mean? Like that's a little weird. That's a little weird to say, but okay. And then we saw early on when his complaint came out and his evidence came out that there was a lot of placating, and he got some criticism for that because people were saying, you know, if he wasn't so nice or if he hadn't given her so much room to like run over him, then things might have turned out differently. And in the very beginning, I was actually one of those people who were saying like, I'm frustrated that this guy like just lets her walk all over him because I didn't understand the dynamic of what was going on. So, you know, there was a lot of placating. So that's what was going on when he was gushing to her that she was a genuine collaborator. It's because she was sitting there whining and crying about not feeling important enough. And so when he tried to kind of make her feel better about it and say that her input did matter, now she's like, well, he said this to my face, but this behind my back. I'm like, what was he supposed to do? Be like, yeah, bitch, your ideas are stupid. Like, how would that have helped the situation and the tension? Genuinely, like, what would she have done differently there in his position, not in hers, because she was the one who had all the power here. Her and her very famous husband. So, all right. Wayfarer policies redacted harassment, but its leaders disclaimed responsibility for creating a safe workplace on set. And then a lot of this is redacted. It's about the policies, HR policies for Wayfarer. So we can't really, you know, get too much out of this. There was a lot in the other document. So if you go to last night's stream and we went through that one, there was a lot in the other document about Wayfarer's, you know, HR process and all that she was complaining about. Okay. Before productions, Sachs, the female producer, Alex Sachs, expressed And then this is redacted. So, but Wayfarer kept HR for itself, okay, and then failed to provide its policies to the cast and crew, make its HR consultant available, or provide guidance on reporting HR concerns. So that's not true from what we've seen. And also, she was given a sheet every day that she came into work that had the information and the number that she could report things to if there was an issue. So, for her part, Sachs understood that HR concerns should be raised to Heath as the signer of checks and agreements, even if the complaints pertained to Wayfarer, Heath, Baldoni, or Sarowitz. In the end, the film's cast and crew did not know, and that's redacted. Okay. Wayfarer and Baldoni fostered a hostile work environment for women. Multiple women felt uncomfortable, marginalized, harassed, objectified, and disrespected by the environment Baldoni and Heath fostered in connection with the film. Okay. And then here she's saying they marginalized and mistreated women based on gender. Sure. In February 2023, pre-production, Baldoni admitted in a lengthy note that, and that's entirely redacted. Okay, and then here's kind of what I was mentioning early on in the stream. But his misbehavior continued. Baldoni consistently yelled at Sachs and exhibited rageful yelling or interrupting reactions when Sachs spoke. Sachs recounted one time when Baldoni, upset with Sachs' input on the film, came up behind where she was sitting and yelled and then slammed his hands on the chair next to her and stormed away. Sachs immediately warned Heath and Giannetti, seated behind her, that she would walk off the movie if Baldoni behaved that way again. As the only woman and non-Wayfarer producer on the set, Sachs felt sidelined by Baldoni and Heath, and she also observed Baldoni being very dismissive of the film's screenwriter Hall, who he did not seem to respect as a female voice on the team and on a movie like this, and it felt especially bad. Hoover expressed, and then there's redacted. So, with Alex Sachs, I know that Alex Sachs was a producer on the film. I don't know anything about Alex Sachs as a person. I've never really seen anything that she's said in all of this. I've not seen her mentioned too much until recently, at least not openly. So I don't really have too much to say about Alex Sachs, other than I would like to wait and see what Wayfarer says in their response to this before I pass too much judgment on this situation. Now, what they're describing here is clearly not sexual harassment, and it's not against Blake, but I don't want to be totally dismissive of a woman that I know nothing about. So maybe she did have some problems with them. They butted heads. Maybe he did get angry. Maybe he did raise his voice. I don't know. That doesn't mean he's a terrible person, right? But I don't want to say that he did do those things either. Certainly not, because I know that when Blake says something, at least half of it is not true. So I don't know if I want to say too much on this right now. Obviously, this is going to be probably one of the big headlines in the next couple of days. But it sounds like they just didn't get along. She didn't like his behavior. Okay, fine. You don't have to like his behavior. That doesn't mean that he sexually harassed anyone. Okay? And that doesn't mean that it was an unsafe environment. As far as the slamming the hands on the chair, when you're having an argument with someone or you don't like someone and you're uncomfortable around them because you have personalities that don't mesh, things from the perspective of one person can be very different from the perspective of the other. So a lot of times there's, person one's perspective, person two, and then there's somewhere in the middle is what actually happened. So that's something that I'll be thinking about when we see the response to these accusations. But as for right now, I can't really say, I'm not going to come out and say everything that Alex Sachs says is untrue, you know what I mean? Because that's not how I approach things. And I think that Blake Lively supporters especially think that I'm just a terrible person who hates women. So they would expect me to come out and just be like, well, Alex Sachs is a bitch, but I don't actually know anything about her. I have no idea. And I don't know if he ever said anything or yelled at her in a way that was unprofessional. I don't know. And my initial gut reaction, even though I like Justin and I support him and I believe that he's innocent of what he's being accused of, I don't want to immediately be dismissive of another woman's, kind of claims. So it's complicated, right? So what I'm saying is I'm not going to pass too much judgment right now. Yeah. And I know that a lot of people would like to hear me say, this person's a cunt, because that's kind of what a lot of people expect me to say. But the truth is, I don't know Alex Sachs to be a liar the way that I know Blake Lively to be a liar. So I'm not going to react that way. That's not how I approach, accusations by other women in general. So, this is kind of a weird, it's giving me a weird feeling. I feel weird about it because I don't know their response to it yet. So I'm going to have to wait and see what happens from there. Shannon OS, thank you for the $10. He probably spoke above a whisper and then accidentally bumped into a chair and then probably apologized to the chair. I mean, there's a really good chance that that's what happened. I don't believe that he actually did anything that was dangerous for any women on set. I don't believe that he actually meant to hurt anyone's feelings or anything like that. I don't know what happened between them. So, but you're right. It doesn't seem like his character to yell at anyone. So, yeah. Okay. But again, this is all distraction. This is nothing to do with Blake's allegations of sexual harassment. And it has nothing to do with Blake at all. So, all right. Heath insisted on a meeting while Lively was undressed and gawked at her body. So we know what happened there. He went into her trailer at her request, and he accidentally made eye contact with her for a second while she was talking. But she was the one, like, she wasn't, I mean, she was covered, right? She was getting, like, what was it, like makeup removed or makeup put on or something? I don't know. And he, like, accidentally made eye contact with her for a second. And then she herself admitted, I know you weren't trying to cop a look or anything like that, but you did, like, look at me for a second. Right? So the way that she's framing this now as he gawked at my body is gross. Tanya Vincent, thank you for the $2. Complete fucking insanity. Oh my god. Oh yeah, I know. I know. And Cassidy says now it's gawked. Yeah. Yeah, no, this is crazy. Okay. So we've seen a lot about that. We don't need to go through that. Baldoni sexualized and objectified women on set. So this is it's mostly redacted, but it has a lot to do with the bar scene where we've seen, like, he calls the outfit sexy. As we know, she was, concerned about her wardrobe for the character being sexy. So, like, okay. We can't really, get too much information from this until the unsealed version comes out. So, Baldoni confessed a troubled history with sexual consent. During a car ride with Lively, her security detail, and her assistant in April 2023, Baldoni, and it's all redacted, Baldoni added gratuitous sexual content and spoke about his sex life. Again, so this is a book that's full of sexual content. Sony were the ones who reached out and said they wanted more sexual content in the movie, more explicit sexual content, because the fans of the book were probably going to expect that. So she's trying to pass it off as he was being gross, but that's not what happened. Baldoni was fixated with Lively's weight. So we know that he had a back injury. There was supposed to be a lift scene. And then he asked the trainer how much she weighed because he needed to know what he had to lift with his, injured back. Okay. And apparently that undermined her confidence behind her back in invasive and humiliating ways. I think you might be a little sensitive there. Okay. And then they wrote here, defendants blame Giannetti with Sony for suggesting a more sexualized script, but even if true, that did not grant Baldoni the right to bypass Lively's approval rights or to use his personal sexual life as justification. I don't know exactly what happened there because it's redacted up there. But Baldoni similarly attempted to add gratuitous hypersexual content for Ferrer to perform, despite the fact that Ferrer portrayed an underage teenage girl. Yeah, Isabella Ferrer is not an underage teenage girl. So let's get that straight. So she's trying to suggest now that he's somehow predatory to teenage girls, right? And the hypersexual content was a sex scene. There was a sex scene in a book about sex and relationships. Like, all right. I know it was ultimately about the domestic violence relationship, but the relationship between Atlas and Lily showed her losing her virginity to him. So it was about the sex. Like, what the fuck did you expect him to do? Be like, okay, and now they hug and the lights go out, end scene. That's not what Sony wanted. So, okay. And we saw how Isabella Ferrer felt. She said it was an extremely safe set that she worked on. She thanked him, a lot, that it was such a great experience. So, Baldoni and Heath pressured Lively to perform unscripted nudity. The birth scene did not call for the simulation of nudity, but on the day of filming, and then there's redactions here, what we do know about that was that she was not nude, and simulated nudity is not nudity. She had bike shorts on and a gown, which the other actor involved in this scene publicly testified to that she was not nude and he has no idea what the fuck she's talking about. Heath showed Lively a video of his wife naked without Lively's consent. Yes, and that upset her so much. This still frame or 1 second of video of them with their newborn baby, where no genitalia was showing, it upset her so much that she demanded that the judge have Jamie Heath submit all of the home birth footage to her so she could see more of it. Uh-huh. Okay. 1 sec. Sarowitz, who was on set on the day of the birth scene, testified, "While I might have technically been non-essential, I did invest $30 million and paid for her salary, or at least my share of it, as well as other actors, and I consider that to be essential." Lively considers that not to be. If Lively considers that not to be essential, she can send me a check. That's actually really funny. So when he was on set, they say it was the day of the birth scene. She makes it sound like Steve Sarowitz just popped in to watch the birth scene. He was never there during the birth scene. Okay, he was on set. I don't remember if it was actually that day, but if it was at a different time. So he was never present on set during the birth scene. And guys, when we're talking about set, this set is a very small space, and then there's a bunch of bigger surrounding areas where they can watch back the film on these big screens. So even if he was, like on set that day, it doesn't mean he was standing in front of Blake Lively in the birthing scene saying, "Come on, honey, push it out." You know what I mean? Shut the fuck up. That's crazy. But Steve Sarowitz is actually hilarious. Okay. Baldoni improvised physical intimacy without Lively's consent. Okay, they're talking about the dance scene. We know that didn't happen the way that she said it happened. They said the footage captures her visible discomfort, including her leaning and pulling away from Baldoni and repeatedly suggesting their characters should just talk. So in that footage, it's like they're pushing and pulling or whatever because, and you can hear them talking about this in the footage. They're doing this build up to where they almost kiss, but they're not quite gonna do it, right? So he's like going in and their like noses are almost touching, or they are touching, but they're not kissing, right? And so there's this kind of tension that they're trying to build up. So it's a little weird, sure, when you're watching it behind the scenes to watch these actors who are not actually romantically involved doing that and seeing how they do it. And I would, if I were an actress, I don't know how they do it because I would just feel awkward as fuck. But, of course, when you're watching the behind the scenes footage of stuff like this, it's not actually as romantic and perfect as it comes off in the actual movie. But this was part of her job. And in my opinion, after watching that footage, it was a part of her job I don't believe she did very well. I thought that she was awkward. I thought that she didn't, follow the direction that she was given, which is part of her job as an actress, which was really just to shut the fuck up at that point. But she insisted on, like chatting and talking, and it was just really weird behavior, in my opinion, like I said. And she was ultimately the one who was unprofessional there. And she was ultimately the one who said something about his nose, being like too big or something, or he should get a nose job. I don't remember what it was. So whatever she described there is not what happened. And then down here, she says, Abel, Baldoni's longtime publicist, described the dance scene as so gross and cringy and speculated that it would prompt Lively to file a cease and desist against the pompous and unlikable Baldoni. I don't know if that's accurately characterized, right? But even if Jennifer Abel described the dance scene in private messages that Lively never should have had, by the way, which is a whole other subject. Even if she described it as so gross and cringy, it doesn't matter. That you can think something is gross and cringy without saying it's sexual harassment, right? Does Jennifer Abel say that was sexual harassment and Blake is going to get a cease and desist because he harassed her? No. Even if Jen Abel thinks that Baldoni is unlikable, it doesn't matter. We all saw what happened there. You can see it with your own two eyes. And nothing in that rose to the level of sexual harassment. And she was, in fact, the one who was unprofessional. So Jen Abel said some things about Justin, obviously behind his back, that have come out and probably hurt him a lot to read. And when I read those messages, I thought that, it was really disappointing. I was like, I don't like you for saying this. But really think about it. And I really thought about it as well. Would you want, like with all your friends, would you want them to see every message you ever sent to someone else about them? Would you want them to hear everything you ever said about them, especially when you were frustrated and annoyed, especially if you work with them? Would you want your coworkers to see everything that you said about them when they weren't around, or everything that you said about them when you were frustrated? Because those might be people that you actually really like, people you consider friends, but you said something out of frustration. You said something in the moment when you didn't have all the information. And that's unfortunately a lot of what happened to Jen Abel. And I judged her pretty harshly with the phone thing in the beginning, because I didn't totally understand that it's standard PR practice to use your regular personal phone for business. So I judged her pretty harshly for her messages and all that she did, and kind of blamed her for a lot of this. And then at the end of the day, it turns out that she's just the target of some exceptionally terrible people. And unfortunately, we're seeing like some of her, what people would probably consider worst moments, because they were unfairly given to somebody who hates her. And so if I put myself in Justin's shoes, I would be like, damn, that hurts. But then also, Justin, being the subject of kind of Blake and Stephanie's wrath as well, might understand like this was not a good moment for her, and she said some things that maybe she didn't totally mean, but she was mad at me, or she was frustrated. So, or she didn't fully understand what was going on at the time. So yeah. Okay. 1 second. So I'm going to roll through some of this pretty fast because I only got like half an hour left. And I'll probably come back and do the exhibits a little bit later because I got to start working. But 1 sec. Okay. Lively and other women repeatedly reported concerns about Baldoni and Heath, which Wayfarer failed to investigate. So we know there were no formal reports made. A lot of this is redacted. There's not much we can really do with this information. Here she mentions that Alex Sachs texted Angie Giannetti that we have real issues and need to replace our director and restrict Heath's access to the set. I don't know when that happened. That could have happened like around when that meeting took place, the 17-point stuff. I don't fucking know. So here Slate was, complaining about something. We know at some point she complained about Jamie Heath saying something about the sanctity of motherhood, which is like, okay, so. But I can't really get too much out of this because so much of this is redacted, like I said. Okay. Lively decided she could not nor expect others to return to a hostile environment. Okay, so we know this was all about the return to production, whatever. The CRA required the presence of an intimacy coordinator. We know that Blake Lively refused to meet with the intimacy coordinator early on, so I don't have any sympathy for her as far as like she's complaining about an intimacy coordinator. Why didn't you work with the one that they hired? But okay. See. Right. Yeah, we know, we pretty much know all about this, so I'm not going to do too much. Sony exercised its right to edit its own version of the film with Lively's help. Okay, so she's saying they exercised their right to edit their own version with Lively's help, but what actually happened was Blake Lively refused to work with them and move forward unless they allowed her to have editing control, and then they used her edit. So, like I said, there's only so much I can work with here because so much is redacted, Sony and Wayfarer develop a plan to market the film as a story of female empowerment, which Lively and the cast follow and support. Cool. The Wayfarer defendants responded by disparaging and discrediting Lively, but there's nothing, we can't really see, what this shit is about. So, but of course they're complaining about the PR stuff. Again. Okay. Yeah, this is pretty much redacted here. The Wayfarer defendants hired crisis experts to bury Lively by discrediting her. We know all about that, plus most of it's redacted. In mid-June, Sachs, who herself didn't want to be pictured with Baldoni or Heath, conveyed to Sony that Hall, the screenwriter who Lively has never met, won't do press with Justin, doesn't even want to be on the red carpet with him. Well, they obviously had some disagreements about the script and all that, so I don't want to, again, I know nothing about this lady, Hall, so I'm not going to say too much about that. Okay. As the defendants were planning an offensive move for Baldoni, the film's marketing plan was eliciting an overwhelmingly positive public response. Sony, which was systematically tracking response to the film, okay, no idea. And then they're saying something about the included wearing florals at promotional events and encouraging viewers to do the same. Grab your florals. I don't know about that because it's redacted. So Baldoni and Wayfarer hired a California-based crisis team to bury Lively. Okay, we've discussed this to death, and it's mostly redacted anyways. Okay. Scenario planning, we've seen so much about that, and especially in the other document that we read, so we don't have to do that. As the film premiered with massive success, defendants launched a social combat plan against Lively. We know all about this accusation, but it's mostly redacted anyways. Okay. Also on August 8th, upon arriving in Chicago following the New York press junket and premiere, Baldoni decided to depart entirely from the film's agreed-upon marketing plan, texting the Team JB social media group chat, and then it's all redacted. The next day, he wrote that, no idea. So, there's really not much to say here because everything is so redacted. And eventually, within the next couple of weeks, there should be an unredacted version of this that comes out. So, right. Yeah, we don't need to go through that. Yeah, so there's really not much you can say about all this stuff because it's so redacted. These trends suggest that the seeded, manipulated narratives fueled subsequent negativity. So they're saying basically that they seeded stuff that then led to subsequent negativity around Blake's past behavior and stuff. So it was their fault that this stuff got brought up, is what I can glean from this with these redactions in place. So I don't know. During a phone conversation on August 29th, Sarowitz admitted that the film had achieved massive financial success, yet his fear that Lively might speak out publicly prompted him to warn that he would protect Wayfarer like Israel protected itself from Hamas. There were 39,000 dead bodies. There will be 2 dead bodies when I'm done. And then she, again, conveniently leaves out the part where he's like, well, no, not dead like that, but dead to me. So the very next day, Baldoni admitted in a text that he knew Lively, and then, of course, it's redacted. So, and then we know from the full context of that recording with Claire Ayub, a recording that he did not know she was taking, by the way, and then she voluntarily hands it over to Blake Lively in a way that's very suspicious. So they're just piling on these guys that they don't like. He was talking about defending the studio, and he made that very clear, right? He was talking about defending the studio, and Claire Ayub even understood that. So if you haven't heard that recording, you should. All right. Okay, and then here she's saying that they continued the retaliatory campaign with a baseless lawsuit and defamatory statements. So they're complaining about their lawsuit again, and then saying that they were defaming her, still basically through Brian Friedman. But okay. Okay. They're complaining about Friedman's interview with Megyn Kelly, his former client. Okay. Right. This is mostly about the lawsuit, the countersuit that's been dismissed. Okay. On January 21st, the defendants provided raw footage of the dance scene along with an approved statement to friendly media outlets and content creators, including the TMZ, the Daily Mail, and Popcorn Planet, which rewarded defendants with headlines falsely asserting that the video proved Lively had lied about being sexually harassed. That is, in fact, what happened. So, and like I said before, this is standard PR stuff. Okay. I mean, she's out here saying all these heinous things, and they're allowed to defend him. It's not like they just came out randomly with that video and was like, look at what a liar Blake Lively is. She said she was sexually harassed and she wasn't. No. Blake was saying things that were entirely untrue about that dance scene. And if you look back at the initial complaint, not her amended complaint, but the initial complaint, you can see, exactly what she said about the scene before that footage came out. And you can see how embarrassing that was for her because she clearly was full of shit. So, Tanya Vincent, thank you for the $2. I keep waiting for the crimes to appear. No crimes here. No crimes here. Just social crimes, maybe. But I don't believe what she's saying. So, let's see. Lively move for protective order pursuant to Rule 3.6 in response to Friedman's incessant character assassination. So we've heard a lot about how she hates Brian Friedman and what he said about her and how she was like going after his law firm and everything. And that was crazy. But Lively suffered damages as a result of the conduct. It's redacted. So it gets into the argument here, and I'm not going to go through too much of that because I'll probably go over some of this with Omar, in addition to some of the other stuff that happened yesterday. Lively sexual harassment claims must proceed to trial. That I agree with. I do think those should go to trial. I'm just going to skim through most of this, but see, I want to point out this here. The totality of the circumstances necessitate denying the MSJ as to the harassment claims because the Wayfarer defendants have failed to meet their burden, and the evidence demonstrates that they subjected Lively to 1, unwelcome conduct, 2, because of gender, that was 3, sufficiently severe or pervasive to alter the conditions of her employment. Okay. Heath's behavior alone warrants denying the MSJ. Okay. And they're talking about what happened in the trailer, so whatever. The Wayfarer defendants fostered an environment laden with gender bias. Well, I've seen what she considers to be gender bias. Jesus. All right. Okay. So this type of stuff, again, is like what I want to go over with Omar. All right. The retaliation counts must proceed to trial. All right. Yeah. So again, this stuff here, the argument is something we're gonna come back to later. Okay. So I think we're done here for this morning, and then I'll skim through this exhibit stuff with you guys before I clock into work. Yeah. Okay. So there's 2 declarations with exhibits. Here's the first one. And it's like 558 pages. And then there's another one that's about 200 pages. So it's something over 700 to 800 pages. So obviously I'm not going to get through all this right now. I got to go pretty soon. But we'll skim through some of this real quick. Actually, let me go to... Hold on 1 second. Okay. Now, I was going to say we could look at like the list of exhibits that would help me, but it does not. Unfortunately, my ADHD brain simply cannot process that small thing with all that information in it. Okay, so we're just going to wing it here. Nope, not that one. This one. Okay. Oh, there is a... Okay, thank God. There's like a contents. Colleen Hoover deposition transcript excerpts. Okay. Interesting. I do want to see what Alex Sachs said, of course, but... So which number is that? Here it is. 15. Okay, so here's part of a transcript. I don't know whose this is. Hang on. Dude, guys, this stuff is long. What I'm gonna have to do is after I clock into work, when I get a break, I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna highlight stuff in here, and then I'll do a separate stream where I go through that with you guys. Anyways, let's just read that little portion right there, and then we'll move on. Wait, no. Oh, this is about the culture of hugging. When some of them were saying something about hugging, certain people felt uncomfortable hugging. And remember, they were asking, like, they asked it as if like Justin and Jamie or whoever it was were the only people hugging. You can see in the footage like people coming up and hugging them. Michael Gottlieb really has like a witch hunt going for the culture of hugging. It's actually kind of hilarious. All right. Okay, and this is, what do you recall Miss Sachs telling you about Miss Slate's concerns? So they're talking about Jenny Slate and what Alex said about Miss Slate's concern. I recall her having lunch with Jenny and saying that she listed a few things. She said Jenny had not appreciated the recording that I had made during pre-production with her and Miss Lively. She had not appreciated a comment that I had made on set regarding her wardrobe, something she was wearing. I believe she also said that Miss Slate didn't like that I was interacting with the fans outside. Well, there was a lot of fans when we were shooting. And then on certain breaks, I would go and just say hi to them because they were out there all day. This must be Justin's, because Justin is really nice to the fans. And if I recall correctly, she was saying to Miss Sachs that she didn't want to be asked to go out and do that as well because she was a private person. So she was asking not to be asked to interact with the fans. I don't know if it was Alex or Angie who told me that she had felt the set was too huggy or comfortable or whatever. I know huggy was a word that was used because I remember the word. They told him he was too huggy. That's the best of my recollection at the moment. Okay. All right. Okay, guys. So I'm going to go through and I'm sorry, I forgot to put it back on the screen, didn't I? There it was. Anyways, I'm going to read through this, highlight some stuff, and I'll come back later on. We'll give it a few hours before I take my break from work. I'm going to go clock in now and then get on with my day. So there's going to be, I'll do this afternoon, and then tonight I'll do the Stephanie Jones response to Jen Abel's motion for summary judgment, which is also insane. God, I'm going to be so tired by tomorrow, but totally worth it. So, okay. Thanks everyone. Don't forget to hit the like on this video for me if you could. And I will be seeing you all very soon. Let me show you this real quick. When I have streams, and like some people don't get notifications, so here's a way that you can know when I'm doing stuff. So when I have streams, sometimes I post here in the post tab. So if you just go to my YouTube channel, you can hit the posts and you can see where I announce stuff. There's all kinds of stuff on here. Yeah. And then also, if you go to, there's a link to, in the description of this stream, there's a link to this Patreon. And I put stuff in here as well. And the notifications are way better than YouTube. So you'll get like an email or a push notification or something anytime that I do a stream or I make some sort of post about something. So if YouTube doesn't work for you with notifications, it's free. You don't have to like be a paid member or anything like that. You can sign up as a free member, but let me go ahead and link this actually. Okay. I'll link it in the chat here. Give me one sec. But the notifications are way better. Also, you can find me on socials, which I put in the pinned comment of every video when I'm done. Okay. I think that should take you to the Patreon, and you can join as a free member. So, like I said, you'll get better notifications there. YouTube notifications suck because you only get a certain number within a 24-hour period, so it's just not going to give you notifications after that. So, oh, mods were already on that shit. Thank you, DFJ, and thank you, Laura. Appreciate you. And all the other mods who were here. P. Mahone, thank you very much. I think I saw a couple other people earlier that I'm going to miss. Cassidy, Sunshine, and everybody who was here last night. Couldn't do this without you. Probably I would have gotten caught up with chat and trying to post things in chat. So I appreciate it very much. I wish I could, do something to thank you in a better way, but all I can say is thanks. So, all right, I will be back later on. Thanks, everyone. And like I said, just go to those pages if you want to see more information about when the next streams are going to happen. So, bye.